Hi, I'm Ronnie Kaplan from Computer Training Solutions.
And this is Gary Feldman from US Computer Connection.
Okay, so I work with individuals and corporate groups in having them training them to become more productive using Microsoft Office products like Excel, which is what we're going to talk about today.
Okay, and Ronnie, so just to make sure that if people have any questions, they could go into the chat section and ask questions, and you are available for training.
Yes, surely I can do training. You can reach me at computertrainingsolutions.biz, B-I-Z, or you can call me at 203-329-2421 to set up a training session.
Great.
So today we're going to talk about some data features of Excel, and I'm going to start out with data tables. And that's a very powerful feature that I think many people don't know too much about. And the concept is this. We create Excel spreadsheets so that we can figure out what our profit will be if we indicate our expenses and our income. We do profit and loss statements, we do budget statements, and they all have formulas in them. And we know that if the information that goes into the formula changes, the result changes. So if you're looking at a profit and loss statement and your cost of your goods that you're manufacturing goes up, you know that's going to affect the total cost and it's going to affect the profit. So you may want to be plugging in different numbers and seeing what the results will be. And if you use a data table, it creates for you a table that shows you all at once what the results would be at certain points of cost, let's say, and you can see what the profit will change to. So I want to give you a pretty simple example of this so everyone can grasp it. So here I have on the screen a payment function. This is just a straightforward Excel payment function. So we have a loan of a company buying a facility of $5.5 million at 5% interest for 20 years or 240 months. And that is the formula that is giving them the monthly payment. Okay, now the formula results in a negative number because that's how Excel expresses a payment. But if we go into the function which relates to the loan, the interest, and the term, and we put a minus sign in front of the present value or the loan amount, that makes it into a positive number. Even though it's still red, I'm going to change it to black, but that's a positive number. So I'd rather work with the positive numbers. Now, in order to create a data table, I need to take this formula that gives me the payment, and I need to move it over here where I'm going to make it part of the table. But in order to do that and not have the relative formula be looking for things above it, like this one is, looking at the 3 cells above it, I have made these references all absolute in the formula, so that no matter where I move this to, it's going to still give me the same answer because it's still relating to these 3 cells. If you don't make it absolute before you move it over, it's going to be looking at these 3 cells and come up empty. So just wanted to make sure you understood that. Now, when you're doing a single input table, in other words, a table with one variable, the top left-hand corner of the table, which is going to be this cell, needs to either be empty like it is now, or it could have, let's say, a label in it, but it cannot have the formula or any values in it because that's going to cause a problem. And then under that, we're going to array our choices. So let's say I wanted to do 240 as the first term, and then I want to see, well, what would happen if I paid it out over 360 months, and then I'm going to select those two and kind of auto-fill it down to get another few choices. So if I'm taking out a $5.5 million loan, I might want to pay it off over a longer period of time. Now, what the table is going to do for us, it's actually going to take each of these term amounts and substitute it into this cell, and then give us a new answer depending on how many months, and it's going to list all those answers here. So I'm going to select the table. And notice again, the upper left-hand corner cell is empty when I'm doing a one input table. And then I'm going to go to the Data tab. And in the Data tab, we have Data Tools over here, this group of data tools. And under What If Analysis, we have a data table. So that's where you get to Data Table, What If Analysis, under the Data Tools on the Data tab. And the Data Table function asks me for a row input or a column input. Now, because we only have one input, we don't have two. And since I have arrayed these in a column, there is no row input, there's just a column input in this case. And what I'm looking for, the input cell, is actually where is it substituting all of these values in to get my new answers, and that would be right here. Where the term is now, it's going to substitute each of these, and when I say okay, there I go. So it's showing me in one place what would happen if I paid off the loan over a longer period of time, what the monthly payment would be. So that's one variable. Now, I could also, even though I only have one variable, I'm going to copy this to one cell over here, and I can modify this. What if I'm interested in finding out what if I paid this off quarterly? So instead of a monthly payment, I'm going to divide the interest by 4 to do a quarterly payment. And then to get the number of periods, instead of a monthly, I'm going to divide it by 3, since there are 3 months in a quarter. And that is going to tell me what the payment would be if I paid it quarterly. And now I'm going to select this range for the table. And even though I have 2 items here in a column across a row, it's really not, it's just a variation of the same formula. So again, I'm going to go from the Data tab to the What If Analysis and the Data Table. And again, there is no row input, it's just a column input. And in both cases, I'm substituting for the months. And when I say okay, other than having to widen this out a little, I now have what it would, what the payment would be monthly and quarterly. I would obviously put labels on here if I was going to be showing this to somebody. And so that's what you can do with your data table. So it's a lot more convenient than plugging in different months here and then writing down what the payment would be for each time. Okay, so I'm going to now show you that we can have a 2-input table, because after all, things are not so simple always that there's only one variable. So many times we have more than one variable. When you have a 2-input table, the top left-hand corner of the table is going to be your formula, and you can only have one formula. So let's say I go over here, and across this row, I'm going to say 4 million and 4,500,000. Whoops, going to get bigger numbers here. Okay, and then I'm going to select those 2 and carry them out a little further. And let's take, reformat that a little. We don't need any pennies, and that'll give us, okay. So let's say that's our, fine. So that's, we want to know at these various terms, and at this principal or loan amount, what would be my payments? Okay, so I'm going to select, and again, when you have 2 variables or 2 inputs, the formula has to be in the top left-hand corner. And I am arraying one of the variables across that row and one of them down the column. So I'm going to again go to Data, What If Analysis, and Data Table. And this time the row input is what is varying across the row is the amount of the loan, the principal, and what is varying down the column is again the months to pay off. And when I say okay, here is my table that is giving me lots of information at what particular term and at what particular loan amount will I have to pay a certain amount. And of course we can see that the more I borrow, the highest loan amount and the shortest period of time is going to be the highest payment. and the lowest loan amount for the longest period of time is going to be the lowest payment. So it's always a good idea to just check out logically that the particular formula you put in or the inputs that you put in are working correctly. Okay, let's say we want to modify this and check out some other choices so that instead of the loan amount, we're going to, and instead of the months, we're going to change the interest rate. So I'm going to array down here, let's say I say 0.04 and 0.045 for percentages, and I take that down to maybe 6.5%, and let's put that in a percent format so it looks normal, and add some decimals to that. Okay, so here I have two inputs again, but the inputs are different. They are the amount of the loan and the interest rate. And again, I'm going to go to the Data tab, What If Analysis, Data Table. What is changing across the row is still the loan amount, and what is changing down the column is now the interest rate. And if I say OK, here again is my table giving me all of those choices. The lowest interest rate and the smallest amount of the loan will give us the smallest payment, and the highest interest rate at the largest loan amount will give us the highest payment. So these are monthly payments. So that's what you can do with a data table. It's very simple once you know how to set it up. And you can have one input or two inputs. I'm afraid we can't have any more than that. We don't have a three-dimensional table. So that's a little bit about data tables. Anybody have any questions about that at this time? Okay, then we're going to move on and I'm going to talk a little bit about data validation. I have a different example. I did this a few months ago, so some of you might have been here on our webinar for that, but I get a lot of questions about this, so I'm going to review it again. And this is an expense report type document. And let's say you were the sales manager and you get these expense reports for different trips to different places, and you want to make sure that nobody is going to submit an expense amount that's greater than $4,000, because that would require a prior approval for. So you can select the range where the expense amounts are going to be listed, and you can go to the Data tab, and this would be under Data Validation, and the first choice is Data Validation. And instead of allowing any value, which is the default in any spreadsheet, we're going to say we can allow either a whole number or a decimal number. I'll say decimal in case somebody put some cents in there. And we want to allow a decimal value that is less than or equal to, and let's say we say 4,000, just for argument's sake. And now, if I try and put in something that's 4,500, I get an error. I can cancel it or retry it. If I put in that something that's, let's make it a little less. Let's make it 3,500. Then it's perfectly happy. Okay, but so far I get no message as to what I should or should not enter in here. If I select that range again and go back to data validation, and then instead of just filling out the settings, I go to my input message, and in the input message I say must enter amount less than 4,000 or 4K. Okay, now when I do that, anytime I click there, I get the instruction. So you can put in any kind of instruction that you want. And as you saw, if I enter something that's too high in amount, it will give me an error message that just says the value you entered is not valid. If you want to give a specific error message, you can go back to, data validation, once you select that same range, and go to the error alert. And I can put in a message that says, whoops, too high, or whatever message I want it to say. And then if I try and enter something that's too high, I get, whoops, too high. So I can modify that message to whatever I want it to say. But it is helpful to have a little, indicator of what they have to do when they enter that. Another feature you might like to use data validation for is, let's say I have here where I want the department to be entered that this expense is being charged against, this trip. And I have a bunch of departments listed down here, and maybe I would like everything to be consistent. I don't want people to say accounting if it's finance department. I don't want people to say R&D if it's research, or vice versa. So I want them to indicate it correctly. So if I go into department and I say data validation, I go back to the settings, and instead of any value, I say list. So I can create a list. I can type it in here and just put commas between them. But since I already have the list here, and you're likely to have a list of your, important information somewhere, I'm going to put that. And then again, if I want an input message, I can say select from list only. And then if I want a special error alert, I can. Usually the standard error alert is fine. So when I see, as soon as I click there, I see the little drop down arrow and it says select from list only. Got a space in there, but that's okay. So I can go in here and pick from the list and indicate whatever. So if I type something that's not on the list, I get the error message. That's not valid. And I can retry it, or, go out of it or whatever. Okay, so that's another way. And that list can be very long if you want it to be. Another choice you have in terms of setting criteria for data entry, which is really what we're doing here, is perhaps for location. There are certain cities that you have your factories in, or that you travel to for clients, and you want them put in again in a consistent manner. Now you could set up a list, or you could say I'm going to limit the amount of text. So if I go to data validation, to the settings, and instead of any result this time, I'm going to say text length, and maybe I'm going to say has to be less than or equal to, and maybe 5 characters. So that if I try to type, and of course I could have put in an error message, but if I try to type in New York, doesn't like that because it's more than 5 characters. But if I do NYC, it's perfectly happy. Or if I try to type in Port Washington, it's not going to like that. Obviously too long. But if I say PWASH, maybe that's the abbreviation used in the company, then that works out okay. So that's another way. And the last one I want to talk about is date. You might want the date to make sure that people aren't backdating things. You want to make sure that the date is a current date when they're filling this in. So you could say under data validation, instead of any value, you could say date, and you could say greater than or equal to, and maybe the start date for now would be the current year. So you could say 1/1/17. And if I try to create an expense report for something last year, and I say 12/10/16, it doesn't like that. And if I try to put in something that is current, and I say May 15, 2017, it will like that date, but it will put it in the format, a different format, the shorter format that I indicated. So those are some of the ways that you can make it more efficient for people to enter information, and more consistent when you're seeing the information from multiple spreadsheets, so you can make sure that it's consistent. And that again is under the data validation function. And you have lots of choices here as to what kind of number, what length, text length, what time, date, putting in a list, and so forth. And being able to put in a message, a specific message that people will see when they click in the range, and also being able to put in specific error alerts if you prefer. Okay, so that's a little bit about data validation. And one other thing I'd like to talk about, since it shows up here, is validation circles, circle invalid data. So I'm going to open up one more spreadsheet, and let's make this a little bit bigger. Okay, and for instance, if I was interested in having circled certain data that does not comport with my criteria, and I want it really obvious that that doesn't meet my criteria, I'm going to go to, again, the data validation, and I'm going to set up what I think is valid or invalid about here. So I'm going to go to, let's say, a decimal value or a whole number, and I'm going to say less than or equal to 4,000. And I'm just doing it on this range. Now, when I say circle invalid data, it's going to circle the data that is not less than, that's invalid, that's not less than $4,000. Okay, I don't have to be selected on that range in order to do that. I can clear the circles, and then I can say circle the invalid data, right? And for one more choice, let's say I do this, and I go again to data validation, and I say number greater than 175. And since I've already told it to circle the invalid data, it does it for that as well. So those are the ones that are not greater than 175, that are invalid. Okay, and if I say clear the validation circles, it clears them all. Okay, but that is still part of what is there, because if I say circle it again, it's still there. So if I want to clear them, I can say, go back to data validation and say clear all. Okay, but that has to be done because you've set up different criteria in different ranges, and that has to be done by range. So that says clear all. And now we should not have any. If I say circle invalidate and nothing happens because I've cleared them. So that those are some of the nice features that you can get to set up criteria for your data or to see different choices in your data. And if anybody has any questions about this, you can send us a chat.
Yeah, and Excel, I know this is just like a small portion of some of the classes that you teach, right?
Right.
This is just a taste.
Yeah, just a taste. And we've done a lot of these over the years. And next month we're going to be doing one on graphics, PowerPoint, or it could be PowerPoint or Excel because the graphics program is really the same. I'm going to be using PowerPoint, but it could be either way. Right,
and we put these up online at uscomputer.com, and you could see all the recordings as well.
Mm-hmm.
And these are all going up on YouTube, so if you want to get a refresher, you're able to see it. So Ronnie, thank you so much.
Okay.
And we'll see you all next month.
Next month, right? We'll send out invitations and.
Okay. Bye, everyone.
Stop recording. Yeah. It's still recording, I think.